I think it's fair to say that AEW has been in a lull for most of 2022 by its own incredibly high standards. That's not to say that AEW has been atrocious or even bad, but most AEW fans I'm sure would agree that for a majority of 2022, AEW hasn't put on a really fantastic stretch of television. There's been amazing moments, matches, and promos, but they have been islands in the ocean of mediocrity that AEW has churned out for most of the year. And I don't really mean mediocrity in the negative sense either. If anything, AEW has just come back down to reality after a red hot 2021. I say this as an AEW fan who's watched from day one, someone who has only cheered for the success of the company and the industry, but I also say this as a realist who can see AEW for what it is, a wrestling company. AEW is not perfect, and neither is Tony Khan, and this year has proved that. Again, I'll repeat it, this does not mean I hate AEW or its programming, but it has felt like we've gone 2 steps forward and 2 steps back for the past 6 months, churning our wheels with no real progress in the grand scheme of things. Granted, a large portion of that comes down to injuries to the world champion CM Punk, as well as key figures like Adam Cole, Bryan Danielson, and Kenny Omega. So many of AEW's major storylines for this year revolved around all of those wrestlers. And just on name value alone, those 4 wrestlers are almost cornerstones of the current day AEW. However, 3 of those 4 have made their return, with only 1 man left to make his return in Kenny Omega. CM Punk has returned to hopefully defeat Jon Moxley and become undisputed AEW World Champion. Bryan Danielson is back to educate Daniel Garcia and convince him to turn pro wrestler instead of sports entertainer, which seems like it will lead to a match against Chris Jericho in a Daniel Garcia on a pole match. And Adam Cole, of course, has returned to progress the Undisputed Elite into its next phase, which itself is linked to Kenny Omega's return. It feels like with these 4 men's return, the tide may be shifting in AEW's future, and we could be potentially entering another golden age of AEW television. I'd be astonished if Kenny's return was not in this trios tournament with the Young Bucks as his partners, especially with Hangman declining their offer. Kenny's return would have been fantastic as a surprise moment, and part of me does feel like it's a missed opportunity at breaking the internet, but the way last week and this week's Dynamite have been built, it's a great way for AEW to grab a few more viewers in anticipation of seeing Kenny Omega's return and reuniting with the Young Bucks in what would be an easy 5-star match against La Facción Ingobernables. I said it right this time. And yes, before anyone asks, I am upset that Andrade's group will be taking an L in the first round of the tournament, because they should be in the final at least. The only thing stopping me from thinking they should be the champions is Kenny himself, but a loss to the Elite, or whatever they're going to be called, isn't a terrible thing, especially after they surely put on an all-time classic match. I'm hoping that it means Andrade and La Facción have something bigger in store for All Out, but truthfully, I'm not sure. I personally think La Facción Ingobernables is pure gold, waiting to be mined out by Tony Khan, but for some reason, the man doesn't want it. I guess he's rich enough. I'd love to see Rush and Dragon Lee become tag team champions while Andrade captures the TNT title one day. Not that I want Wardlow to lose the belt just yet, but Andrade would be an incredible TNT champion, and in my opinion, it should be him who dethrones Mr. Mayhem, maybe a little later down the track. Regardless, I just want gold around their waists and for them to be booked in a more prominent position. Kenny's return is clearly massive, and he's going to have massive implications on the Elite storyline, and I would be shocked if Kenny and the Young Bucks don't end up being Trios champions by the end of it. I assume they will be the inaugural Trios champions, and that will be kickstarted on the next AEW Dynamite, hopefully, unless something weird happens. But the thing I'm most looking forward to in the upcoming AEW Dynamite is Bryan Danielson versus Daniel Garcia's rematch in a best 2 out of 3 falls contest. I'm absolutely loving the feud and the story between these two. Danielson coming back and taking a somewhat protected loss against Garcia was a great way to make Garcia look strong, as he still dominated most of the match while giving reasonable doubt to whether he could back it up in a second match. Smart money would say that Danielson will win this rematch 2 falls to 1, but I wouldn't even mind Danielson going 2-0 here. The way I would frame it is that Danielson mops the floor with Garcia and blames Garcia's shortcomings on the fact that he persists with the sports entertainer mantra. This could lead to Jericho wanting to defend Garcia and the sports entertaining shtick, and a match at All Out between Jericho and Danielson, like I said before, with Garcia on a pole. Okay, not really, but Garcia's conflict of who to listen to would be an integral part of the story and the match. Danielson defeating Jericho could convince Garcia and open up his eyes to leave the JAS and pursue his desire of being the best technical professional wrestler in the world. He could afterwards challenge Danielson to another match, the third and final in their trilogy, and I would have this raise the stakes once again to maybe a 60-minute Iron Man match or a pure wrestling match or something similar, where Danielson would still win, but nowhere near as easily as their second match, where Garcia earns Danielson's respect and potentially joins the Blackpool Combat Club. There is so much you could do with this feud and the series of matches that Danielson and Garcia could potentially have, but most of all, first and foremost, we're going to get some first-class technical professional wrestling. CM Punk's return, of course, in the most literal sense, is the most important of them all. As AEW champion, his absence has been felt the hardest in my books. Yes, I obviously miss Kenny Omega, and yes, I love watching Bryan Danielson wrestle, and yes, I'm invested in the Elite storyline, perhaps not as much as others, but the biggest hole that I've personally felt was the lack of an undisputed AEW World Champion. Surprisingly, Jon Moxley's run as interim champion has been more entertaining than I expected. I was definitely not a fan of the interim TNT title situation, but on this occasion, I think it made enough sense to do. In the future though, I wouldn't mind Tony Khan playing with the idea of just not having an interim champion. Don't do an interim belt and instead promote the TNT title into the main event and give the secondary champion some shine. You could even bring the All Atlantic champion back to America and book some invitationals with wrestlers outside of the company. AEW has enough titles where you could book 1 or 2 months worth of television without a world title, interim or not. Instead, do a #1 contender tournament to have something ready to go for when the champion returns. That's what I would prefer. That being said, Moxley's done a fantastic job at keeping the belt relevant and fresh in our minds, and I do like the fact that he and William Regal have both been flaunting the idea that Moxley is in fact the real world champion defending his title. CM Punk and Jon Moxley are going to have a great feud. I have absolutely no doubt about that, and I'm sure they'll put on a fantastic main event at All Out. Fingers crossed we see MJF after that. It might be a bit too soon, considering CM Punk hasn't really defended his title, so Tony Khan may want to give him a few more feuds before MJF, but the sooner we get MJF back, the better in my opinion. Unfortunately for Punk, his injury has put a pretty heavy blight on his title run, but if anyone can salvage it, I'm sure it's him. I'm not going to sit here and claim that what AEW is about to produce for the rest of the year will be on par with the best they've ever produced, but it's certainly gearing up in that direction. The Elite Civil War, Punk's title reign, MJF's potential return, the Blackpool Combat Club's continued development, these are the building blocks for the next 6 months worth of programming. I hope Tony Khan doesn't just rely on these elements. I hope there's consistently good booking for the tag team champions, who have become a bit of an afterthought. I hope that Wardlow continues to grow as a singles competitor and as a champion. I think Miro and Malachi Black's collision will be extremely interesting, with hopefully both of them coming out of it smelling like roses. I hope La Faction regroup after their loss and find something to sink their teeth into. Ricky Starks and Hobbs' feud is something to look forward to, as is Hook and his reign as FTW champion. Christian Cage and Jungle Boy are coming to a head, and that's only scratching the surface of what AEW has at its fingertips. We are potentially at the precipice of another golden run here in AEW, and clearly I'm optimistic, but cautiously so. Tony Khan has shown time and time again he knows how to execute his booking decisions in a masterful way, but he has also shown he can drop the ball. Many of the major storylines book themselves. They're actually quite a straight shot, but the supporting cast needs to be just as good if he wants consistently elite, pardon the pun, weekly television television for the rest of the year, which is something that Tony Khan should not only want and be striving for, but right now is something that he needs. I will keep bringing up the fact that WWE is no longer the competition that Tony Khan has been used to and the competition he has been facing for the last 3 years. WWE is now a company that seems ever so much more attractive to a lot of the talent that jumped ship to AEW. Tony Khan should be scared and should be protective of his talent. Not all of them will leave, but some might, and many fans won't be so quick to defend AEW when their favorite talent is no longer part of the company. I've said it time and time again that I am in no rush to watch WWE just yet, but should they somehow bring back a Miro or an Andrade, then you better believe I'll be watching them on WWE television, which is not a bad thing. The overall success of both companies is a good thing for the fans and the industry, but with my AEW hat on and with Tony Khan's best interests in mind, I would recommend he goes flat stick, 100% full power for the next 6 months. We'll see what happens and whether he drops the ball or steps up to the plate and hits a home run. Only time will tell. What do you guys think? Are we on the dawn of a golden era in the next 6 months here in AEW? Do you think we are heading for consistent 5-star shows on a weekly basis? Or do you think that this is all smoke and mirrors and that it's not going to live up to expectations? I am, like I said, cautiously optimistic. I think there is so much going on in AEW. There's almost too much going on in AEW for it to not lead into a golden era. AEW has had the injury excuse for a long time, but not anymore. Right now, competition is going to be at its steepest, at its sharpest. WWE is making positive changes, and AEW need to follow suit. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know if we are heading for another golden age in AEW. Like I said at the top of the video, I found the last 6 months to be hit or miss. There's been a lot of good and a lot of bad. I think we've got to eliminate a lot of the bad and stick with the good. But yes, I am excited, and yes, I am optimistic, because at the end of the day, the ingredients that we have should end up in a delicious meal. We just need a chef that can put them all together in the right way. And we gotta hope that that chef is Tony Khan, because he runs the kitchen. If you did enjoy it, leave a like. You guys have been killing the likes, as I've always said. Thank you so much for your support. It means so much because it helps in the algorithm, gets the video out to new people, basically. So your like, if you haven't already, would be very much appreciated if you enjoyed the video. Hope you guys are happy and healthy, and I hope life is treating you well. I'll see you in the next one soon. Stay stunning.